to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Indeed we are, and we're hoping that our friend Louis can drop in today to join us. I think we had a little bit of trouble because of daylight savings time, because I just got a note from him saying, it's in an hour, isn't it? And like, no, it's actually starting now because he's in the UK, we're in the US. Their daylight savings time happens differently from ours. So yeah, I'm going to send him a note here in just a second and say, nope, we're in daylight savings time now. But anyway, we have a special guest joining us today. Her name is Christine. Oh, God, I hope I should have asked your name before we even start here. Christine Hronec?
Hronec, correct.
Hronec? Oh, I got it right.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime you get a challenging name like that, it's like, okay, you got one shot. Can you get it? But she is the author of a book that just came out. And this book is called Unlock Your Macro Type. Mm-hmm. It is basically, she is all about the food. There's no other way to say that. She's all about the food, but she's about it in the good way, because she wants to help people to eat healthier, eat better, lose some weight, live the healthy fitness type lifestyle. By the way, my wife told me a fitness joke today. She saw this one on Facebook. She said this was actually a quote from Snoopy the dog. Snoopy said that he was on a new diet. He's in the fitness protection program. And he's not doing too well on his diet. So you'll have to give Snoopy some tips about how to stay on the diet. But anyway, Christine, thank you for joining us on the show today. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. Tell us about the book. Tell us about how it got started and what it's all about. Give us some clues about it.
Sure. So Unlock Your Macro Type. So for those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Christine Hronec. I'm the owner and founder of Gauge Girl Training, which is an online meal planning and coaching service. I'm a food scientist and chemical engineer, and I came into the health and wellness space from the manufacturing side. I started my career at DuPont. I have a degree in chemical and biological engineering, bachelor's and master's. Worked for DuPont, worked in the biotech space. And at that point, I had an offer to be an owning partner in a dietary supplement manufacturing company. And I was running the plant, like formulating products, creating things in sports nutrition. And I always had a long-term goal of, I wanted to be able to get very fit, very lean. But no matter what I did, I was never able to obtain the aesthetic that I wanted. And I actually became a marathon runner through the late 90s, early 2000s. And I would run anywhere from 50 to 60 to 70 miles every week.
Wow.
And no matter how much I ran, I thought that I just needed to burn more calories to get to my goal, but it didn't happen. I was hungrier. And I started to get this like skinny fat physique where like
skinny fat. Okay, there's a new technical term going on there.
Yeah, skinny fat is just like, low muscle mass, high body fat. You're smaller, but you don't have like a tighter appearance. And it wasn't until like this really frustrated me because, I saw these like fit, more athletic looking women who had abs. And again, it's still feminine looking. And I was like, what are they doing that I'm not? And I'm like, Christine, why don't you apply your knowledge of science to this? Because what I know, working at DuPont, working in industry is if it cannot be measured, it cannot be improved. So I took an engineering approach to it, started looking at this more objectively as opposed to just emotionally and irrationally, because the thing is, so many people approach dieting from a desperate point of view. We're like, I'll try whatever, I'll do whatever, but we don't really think like, is this right for me? Is this good for me? So long story short, I identified where I was falling short. And the thing is, I was tracking my calories, but I wasn't considering my macros. And macros are what make up the caloric content of food. All food is either a protein, a carb, or a fat. And it's not enough to just count calories. And here's why. So this is what 1 pound of body fat looks like right here.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And this is what a pound of muscle looks like. So the thing is, I was losing weight, right? But the type of weight I was losing muscle, I was losing water. And so many people get so obsessed about weight loss, but what you really want to be concerned with is fat loss. This is what 1 pound of body fat looks like. Because if you're losing this while sustaining muscle, your physique is going to look completely different and it has nothing to do with what you ate. It's more about your body composition. So once I started like shifting my mindset into that direction, I started to get really good results. And I started increasing my protein content. I was dialing down my dietary fats, moderating my carbs, changing my training. And I did my first fitness competition. I won second place and I got the bug. I started doing this. And this was in 2012. I started sharing it on Instagram. I started talking about it on YouTube. And everyone was asking me so many questions. They're like, how did you do this? Da, 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 da. So I started sharing and posting and making video after video. And now I'm at the point I have close to 30 million views on my YouTube channel. Everyone wants to know who, what, when, where, why, and how. And the thing is, what I learned is over the last decade of health coaching, what works for me doesn't work for everybody. So this is where I came up with the concept of a macro type. A macro type is a bio-individual way to gauge the best way to fuel your body. Some people do best being fat fueled. Some people do best being protein fueled. Others do best being carb fueled. And this book explains why. There are quizzes, there are meal plans, training plans, everything inside to help you identify your macro type to help you reach your fat loss goals.
And the word that's new to me in what you just described, by the way, that was a great description. But the new word, I've heard this word used in other contexts where food is related, but I think you're using it in a slightly different way. So I'm looking for a definition here. Macro. What do you mean by macro? What exactly is a macro?
So macro is short for the term macronutrient, and a macronutrients are the nutrients our body needs in larger quantities to function. And there are three. It's either proteins, carbs, or fat. There are no other macronutrients. Technically, we could consider alcohol its own macro, but your body doesn't require it to live just because it performs in the body so chemically different. But there are technically three macronutrients. So again, nutrients your body requires in large quantities to function.
Okay, that's a good definition. And we welcome our friend Louis D'Souza. Hey, Louis, we had a little bit of a quandary there with daylight savings time. So yeah,
Hi, Christine.
Oh, thank you.
But we're glad you could make it. Good to have you here. We're talking about Christine's book that just came out. It came out like within the last month or so. Unlock the macro type. Your macro type, excuse me. Yeah. And so
you're into the big things, not the small things. Huh?
That's right.
Exactly.
That's very cool. Now, you also mentioned something I think a lot of people have encountered, and it's basically a cause for a lot of conversation and a lot of consternation, both, which is just because it works for you, it doesn't mean it works for somebody else. Well, you take a very scientific approach to things, an engineering approach, as you described it. Why is it then? Why is it that one thing works for one person but not for another? What's the difference?
The main variable that I've identified in the last 10 years, looking at this from the most scientific perspective, is one variable only, and that is carb tolerance level. So again, there are three macronutrients, but I've found the greatest indicator that's going to shift the way somebody should eat is the way the body responds to carbohydrates. So on one end of the spectrum, we have people with a low carb tolerance. We're talking type 2 diabetics, folks with insulin resistance, some women with hormonal imbalances, maybe some people with food intolerance. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, we have hard gainers, those folks with the high metabolisms, the people that no matter what they eat, they cannot gain a pound to save their life. So there's a spectrum. And where people fall on that spectrum is going to vary tremendously. It's based off of your glucose metabolism. It's based off of your sex hormones. It's based off of your genetics. It's based off of your digestive enzymes. It's based off of your gut health. There's a wide variety of biochemical factors that impact how your body responds to carbohydrates. And the reason why I came up with this term macro type is because I used to teach a lot about body types on YouTube. Body type is just something that gauges, where your fat and muscle are distributed, how easily you gain and lose muscle and fat. But the thing is, I can't look at you, Walt, and just say, hey, this is how your body's going to respond. I'd have to ask you questions. I may need some blood work. And there are things intuitive to you that dictate how your body responds to carbohydrates, just like, everybody is going to behave differently. And I've identified that has the biggest difference between individuals, and the result of that dictates everything else.
And does that whatever that ratio is or that factor or however we describe it, does that change over time or does it stay relatively the same?
Oh, it changes over time, absolutely. It's for instance, even just with age, if you gain more and more body fat, for instance, right? So if you gain more body fat with time, a lot of people think as body fat as a stored potential source of energy. And it is that, but people don't realize, and this research literally came out in the last 10 years, that fat is also an endocrine organ. So what does that mean? Fat can receive and send chemical messengers. Fat can send out hormones into your body. So the more fat you have, the more estrogen you have. The more estrogen you have, the more your body is likely to store glucose as fat. And it completely shifts your glucose metabolism very much so. So age definitely has a factor. There's so many other variables that indicate what is going how your body's going to respond with time. So it's not
It's going to
something that
vary.
is set in stone.
It's going to vary from morning to afternoon to lunch to dinner. Any
Yeah,
what?
fair
It's
enough.
going to vary
Yeah,
all the time.
it's
When you're
definitely
sleeping, it's going to vary.
it is going to vary. However, within a given day, for person, the biggest time you're going to see the biggest difference in your carb tolerance level is before and after weight training. Weight training is actually one wonderful tool, introducing resistance training to boost your carb tolerance level, because when you do resistance training, your body is going to tap into glycogen as a fuel. And glycogen is carbs that are stored inside of the muscle cells. So once your glycogen is depleted, your body has a higher carb tolerance. What that means is you can consume carbohydrates and they're going to be replenished into the muscle cells and not stored as fat. So, resistance training was one of the big knobs that made a huge difference in my ability to shift my physique. And it not only helps you, from a visual perspective, it helps you on so many metabolic levels as well.
Can you give us some idea of what some of those levels are? I mean, give us sort of a flavor of how the whole thing lays out.
Yeah, so for instance, when you introduce resistance training, your body is going to be able to absorb more glucose after you work out. It is definitely a huge, huge, huge variable. Other factors that are going to indicate how your carb tolerance is, it's also going to be related to your cycle. So, for instance, for women whose hormones are varying at different points in the month, there is a period during your cycle where your carb tolerance is actually higher, and that is during the luteal phase, which is the second half of the cycle. So there's a lot of really good nuggets in here that are going to teach you more about how your body responds and why. But I think that this can sound overwhelming, like, wow, this may sound like a very heavy academic read, but the reality is I've boiled it down, I've made it simple. There are quizzes that are going to like point you right to where you need to be. And anything else, you guys can obviously, I want everybody to read the book the whole way through, but I know how people get, and I know they want to like jump right to the quiz, go right to their macro type and read the section specific to their macro type. And that's perfectly fine as well.
I gather then that one of the purposes of at least one of the quizzes is to help you figure out what your macro type is. Because
Correct.
it's not necessarily going to be an obvious thing, right?
No, it is not at all. And I really challenge people to think about how they respond to carbohydrates, how they respond to food, just to give you a flavor. So, for instance, an example would be, when you eat starchy carbs, for example, like rice, grains, potatoes, how long before you feel hungry again? And there's, is it 2 to 4 hours, 60 minutes? I'm hungry again in about 30 minutes. Or once my hunger is turned on, it seems to never be satiated after I start, and I experience sugar cravings that continuously escalate. Other questions related to how does your digestive system respond after you eat starchy carbs? Questions related to gut health issues. Have you ever had SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, leaky gut syndrome, IBS? Other things about how things impact your cognitive energy, your sugar cravings, food intolerances. How difficult is it for you to lose body fat? Because there are some folks who they try every single thing, and no matter what they do, no matter how little they eat, how much they exercise, nothing budges. And that's something important to factor in when setting this up for somebody.
And as somebody who was at one point in my life, through most of my life, I was in that other end of the spectrum you were talking about. It didn't
Mm,
matter what I took into my body. I mean, I could eat anything, no big deal. And then all
mm.
of a sudden, I reached my 60s, and that didn't work the same way anymore. All of a sudden, my body started doing things. I started seeing bulges that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy because, when your metabolism shifts, when your hormones shift, it can be a rude awakening for a lot of folks who really didn't need to manage their food intake
Mm,
with that high level of scrutiny. Now, for me personally, I was always one of those people, like I could lose weight easily, but I could gain it pretty easily as well if I don't like pay attention. So, I could never stray too far because it would catch up with me quite quickly.
okay.
Yeah.
What's the deal too with the phrase that you're using, carb tolerance? I mean, that's kind of it's almost like you're treating carb like a poison, which a lot of people actually think of carbs that way. But I get the feeling you're not actually saying it's a poison. You're saying this is just something that you don't want to have too much of. Am I wrong?
No, not it's not necessarily that. I think carb tolerance is just a measure. It's a gauge of how well your body can process carbs. So it's just a matter of helping us understand, where, let's just say on a scale, if you have a high carb tolerance, that means your body can handle them with ease, for digestive issues. If not, if your carb tolerance is lower, it just means that the quantity and type of carbs that you can be consuming is different. So I'm not saying carbs are a bad thing whatsoever. It's just more about knowing how much your body needs.
Okay, that's fair. And then also on the idea of muscles training, resistance training, and so forth. There are some people who I have a good friend named Joel Alston who he's in the gym every single day. I mean, he loves it. If he has to be away for more than 6 hours, he's in withdrawal. But
Mm,
there are other people you say resistance training. Oh my God, I have to go into the gym. I
mm,
remember one particular person telling a story about how she joined a gym class, but it didn't work out because then she realized she actually had to go to the class.
mm.
So what about somebody who isn't really into that? Is that the only option? Are there other possibilities?
So, intimidation with resistance training is very common. And thing is, it's not necessarily hard because it's hard. It's hard because it's new. And I used to be one of those women who thought that if I started lifting weights, I would look like a man. And the reality is, it was nothing like that whatsoever. It gave my body shape, it gave me tone, it gave me definition, it gave me curves, it gave me a body that I love, it gave me a body that, like, no matter how much I ran, like I told you, as a marathon runner, I it it gave me a shape. And I think that, you have to ask yourself, how badly you want your goal, because if these are the ways to go about it that are proven and that are effective, you know, you need to listen to that and take it seriously. I mean, certainly, are there other ways to obtain your goal physique? Sure, you could, head over to your plastic surgeon's office. But, if you want to take this, go about it naturally in a sustainable way, resistance training is definitely valuable. It's value adding. It makes a difference. Now, does that mean you need to become a bodybuilder or a fitness competitor? Absolutely not. But it's good for your muscles to be worked out. It's good to have that blood pumping. For both women and men, it's very, very healthy. Now the crazy thing is, I'm gonna share a secret with you guys. I don't like resistance training. I do it because I get the results I want, but it's not something that I love doing. There are some people that love going to the gym. I'm not one of those people. But like I do it because I get the results. So the thing is, I'm living proof that you don't have to necessarily love it per se to do it, you know?
That's interesting because I mean, not what 15 minutes ago you were talking about how you used to run 60 to 70 miles a
Yeah,
week, something like
I
that.
I love cardio. I love long distance running. It allows me to space out mentally. I find that relaxing, as weird as that sounds. But the thing is, I get better results when I do more resistance training and I dial my cardio down. So the thing is, I did all that running because I thought it would get me better results.
Hmm.
So, and it didn't. So,
Well, I'm glad to hear that you actually like it. I mean, my favorite, I guess you could call it a cardio activity. I just think of it a nature activity. Is just going out and doing a walk. I have like a 4 or
I
5 mile
love
walk I do
walking.
every day, and I see the runners going by, and I swear they're in pain. their faces say, "Oh yes, I'm out here to exercise, but I'm hating every single step."
Sure.
So to hear you say that you're loving it, I mean that's a very positive thing. I don't see too many of those.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about it is, like I said, it just allows you to like disconnect from your brain for a second. And like my
Mhm.
mind is always going. I have a million tabs open. So I could not hear every tab for a little while.
So Louis, you've been absorbing what's been going on here. Do you have anything for Christine? Any questions or comments?
Well, you know me, Walt. I can take over the whole session.
But this is not an exaggeration, Christine. He's not just. This is not hyperbole. He's really meaning this.
I don't know if you remember, Walt, but I don't talk about it much, but I used to help people lose weight.
This is
And
true.
I used to run high intensity interval resistance training classes. So there's
This is also
nothing
true.
much that I'm not agreeing with or understanding quite clearly. It's quite a journey, really, to understand. And I used to use the Bulgarian bag. I don't know if you've ever used it. No? Yes? Do you understand
Yes,
what they are?
yes, I do. Yes, I've heard of them. Correct.
You've heard of them.
I have
Okay.
not used them.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not used that specifically, but I have heard of it.
For high intensity interval resistance training, there's almost nothing better. It doesn't harm your body. It really exercises, right from your toes to your head and into your arms and your hands and everything. And it can be quite short and swift, and it's really quite enjoyable the way you're swinging it around, rotating the body. It's fantastic. You should have a look at some YouTube videos on it on the internet. There's some great examples of it. And yeah, I left the whole business in a little bit. I still do a bit of it now, but I left it in a bit disheartened by, as you were terming it, the same thing I understood as well, is to try and get people to stay losing weight. It is a real challenge for a lot of people. So the law of attraction, of course, helped me hugely see another way around the whole thing massively, which is what Walt and I talk about every Monday. So, it's been a long journey about understanding my own body and all the rest of it, because I was a sick kid, and I've had a whole journey of trying to fight to get my own health back and all the rest of it. So I'm now 54 and the healthiest I've ever been in my life, almost.
Good for you. Congratulations.
It's there's so much I've learned along the way. It's unbelievable. And understanding macronutrients was a biggie for me. Understanding the importance of protein, how it builds a muscle, and how the more muscle you've got on the body, the more fat you burn, et cetera, et cetera. It's really very, very, very interesting once you start understanding the whole process, just the macronutrients by themselves, carbs, complex carbs versus simple, and all the numerous aspects of all that. And also that lended me all the way to growing these things, how they grow them, and then soil. And my big thing at the moment is all about soil. I can talk about soil all day, every day, and how it's degrading and what things we can do to improve it. So yeah, it's been a long journey of understanding a huge amount of different things. And that when you lifted up that bit of fat there, I had exactly the same. I'd bought the same piece of the 1 pound of fat. I've still got it behind me on the shelf. And it's important to explain to people, what a pound of fat looks like. And I remember massaging somebody once, and watching the fat break under my fingers and actually tear. And I didn't know fat did that. I had no idea that you could actually massage somebody and tear fat apart. There's so many things I've learned along the way, and it's quite a journey to dive into the body and to see how all the different parts work together. So I'm really happy you created that book, and I wish you all the best with it, because it's important information for everybody to kind of grasp and understand.
Absolutely. And I think one thing just to add to that is, we kept saying about it being a journey. I think a lot of people approach the journey with their own trial and error, right? We try things, we see what works, we throw things at the wall, see what sticks. And I think that if people are doing that, again, there's nothing wrong with trying things, exploring, listening to your body. But the way I look at macros and the way I like to explain it to people, it's like using a GPS if you're trying to go from point A to point B, right? So if you're going to have that dialed in on your GPS when you're driving, it's going to give you that like turn by turn, like step by step guidance of how to get there. Now, do you need GPS to go from one place to another? No, you do not. Are you going to need a GPS forever? No, you're not going to need macros forever. It's going to be great to get you dialed in if you're lost, get you on the right trajectory, and make sure that you're not like wasting as much time, because I find a lot of people wasting a lot of time, a lot of energy just stuck. And in this day and age, most people are getting their information from social media. They're getting their information from the internet. And as you guys know, the internet has excess information of questionable quality. And it's really hard for people to know, what is this, just somebody who has millions of followers, has zero training or backing or expertise, but yet, they're very popular, so they want to start selling meal plans or fat burners or something in the space just to, profit off of their following, versus people who are actually trained and are experts and truly understand the ins and outs, upside down, inside out of this. And it's very challenging for folks to discern between those two. And there aren't a lot of resources out there that fundamentally explains it. Like inside this book, I'm not trying to get you to buy a meal plan. I'm not trying to get you to do anything. Everything you need is in this book. Like everything is there that you would ever need if you can read it and, apply the information to yourself. So I think that it's just so important to empower people through education, as opposed to throwing more and more products and band-aids and stickers on things just to get people stuck in the matrix, if that makes sense. Because
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of freedom that can be found in truly learning how to fuel your body properly. And I like to take an approach of adding to the plate, not taking away to the plate, as opposed to saying, oh man, you're telling me I can't have this, I can't have that. No, I'm saying you need to align your body and fuel it with what it actually needs. And once your body's getting what it needs, you're going to feel great. You're not going to be hungry. You're not going to be starving. You're going to actually be quite content and satisfied. And I think that there's a big gap there, though, aligning people to understand how to fuel their body with what their body actually needs. And closing in on that gap, it makes the biggest difference. And it's so awesome to witness when that clicks for somebody, and when they see it and when they feel it and they can understand that and grasp it.
Oh, that's good. Something else you touched on briefly there, I wanted to return to it because I think it's an important point. This is something that's been coming up a lot here on the program, various conversations I've had with people, and that is people, you kind of alluded to it, people have a tendency to be indiscriminate about who they're going to get information from. Whereas the smart coaches, the smart teachers say, learn only from somebody who's already done it and already been there. Don't learn from somebody who read it out of a book, somebody who claimed that, they took a course, they got a degree. Learn it from somebody who's actually been there. You want to learn how to increase your money, learn from somebody who's increased the money. You want to learn how to increase your health, learn from somebody who's increased their health. You want to improve your relationships, learn from somebody who's improved their relationships. And I kind of get the feeling that's what you're alluding to, because it's often hard to tell the difference, but on the other hand, that becomes the easy question to ask. Have you done it? Have you been there?
Yeah.
I mean, are you really the person who should be teaching me?
Yeah, no, and it's a very important perspective. And there's one caveat though. So the thing is, like I said, I've definitely been there, done that. I have my own testimony and transformation, but I also see folks who found something that works for them and then want to perpetuate that message to the masses without considering the biochemical needs of the individuals. So, for instance, I've seen lots of women and men who are hard gainers, for instance, people who are naturally lean, naturally high metabolisms, never struggled to lose a pound a day in their life. And their biggest challenge to reaching their physique goal was they had to eat more. And for most people, that's not the challenge, that's not very common. And, the context of how somebody got there and where they're coming from, it varies because I see a lot of people out there who are, like I said, it's one dimensional. And I too was very one dimensional from 2013 to 2015. Anytime I coached somebody who looked like me, had a similar body, similar age, plus or minus so many years, I got you. But then once I started working with people outside of my bubble, right? Different ages, different health conditions, that's where it challenged me. And I started writing this book actually back in 2015. So I've been writing this book for 7 years. This
Wow.
isn't something I just rolled over bed one day and say, oh, I'm going to do this and just banged it out. Like this has been vetted and beaten apart, taken down. Like, I have worked with over 40,000 people. I have 40,000 data points that is validating the research that I put into here, in addition to hundreds of white papers and independent third-party studies.
But the key there is you learned, you recognize what the limits of the learning are, and then you learned beyond what you had learned.
Yes, correct.
I think that's a big indicator of whether or not a teacher is really a good teacher.
I would agree. I would agree with that.
Because if you're willing to learn beyond what you've already learned and recognize and acknowledge that this is beyond what I learned, but you know what? I have enough evidence to tell me that I've got some of the answer, but I don't have all the answer. I'm going to get the rest of the answer.
Exactly. And it's crazy. Well, because I remember the first client that I was struggling to get her results. We were doing one-on-one online coaching, checking in week after week, and nothing was changing. And I'm like, are you sure you're sticking to your calories? Are you sure you're doing your cardio? Are you sure like you're not cheating? And she's like, yes, yes, yes. And when you're working side by side with people like that, and like I said, I've worked with so many people, I'm like, she's not lying. Like I'm doing something wrong. So as her coach, I needed to find out why she wasn't responding. And obviously I learned, I figured it out, and I was able to identify how she needed results. But it was just one of those things that once those things happen, you have to take a moment to learn. Anytime that happens. And the thing is, no matter what field you're in, that's going to happen at some point or another, where you're not going to have the answer, and you got to go find the answer.
Which is the sign of a good researcher.
Agreed.
I mean, that's why they call it research. You don't search once and say, okay, I'm done.
Yes, I love that. That's cute.
It would be nice and easy, but then again, we wouldn't have college degrees if we needed that, right?
Exactly. No, fair enough.
It's funny.
Very valid points.
When you're in the middle of dealing with people who are experiencing results that you don't expect, how do you deal with that? I mean, you described what you did in terms of a factual way, in terms of the factual steps you took, but there's also there's the emotional and the mental side of that, and you're dealing with a human being, you're dealing with a human life. How do you handle that normally when you're dealing with somebody and they're just not getting the results you're expecting?
So you need to decouple the emotional side from the habit action side, like what's actually happening. So the thing is, what I typically ask people is, okay, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how closely did you stick to your plan this week? 10 being perfect, 1 being like, you didn't care. And like, people are like, oh, I did an 8, I did a 9, but like you have to really ask. So the thing is, if the compliance was low, was the compliance low because the person was full? Was the compliance low because they just didn't like the food and wanted to eat something else? Was the compliance low because they weren't motivated and didn't feel like it? If it's something mental, that's something completely different. And I can work and guide and motivate and help people with that piece. But what I need to get people to the point is, when they are following the plan with perfect compliance, is it working or not? And I think that if you're not ready to really stick to a plan and apply yourself, macros is not going to be for you. You probably need to work on improving your habits. You probably need to work on being more consistent. You maybe need to work on dialing down alcohol. You probably need to work on getting movement in on a regular basis. You may not be ready to dial in your macros, if that makes sense. And that's okay. Not everyone is at that point where they're ready to give it a really focused, dialed in approach, because you're really wasting your time if you're not going to be consistent, if you're not going to really dedicate and dial in the numbers. Because here's the thing, A+ effort yields A+ results. If you give me mediocre effort, you're going to get mediocre results. And I tell my people all the time, my clients, I'm like, it's up to you. Like, yes, I want you to succeed. I want you to be successful, but you're only hurting yourself if you don't see it through. And I challenge people. I'm like, you know what? You owe it to yourself to see what would happen if you actually follow through with the plan. Because I'd say 80 to 90% of lack of progress, once you're on a dialed in macro plan, it's from compliance. You just got to show up and do it. Like, honestly, you just got to show up and do it. Now, there are some nuances where I need to customize and tweak and tailor things, and those nuances are explained throughout the entire book. But you really need to be ready.
I understand what you mean. Now, we're actually zeroing in on a topic that we address here a lot on the show, and I'm going to be very curious to hear what your take is on it. But that topic is mindset. And mindset plays a role in every endeavor that human beings engage in. I don't care what the endeavor is. It could be sitting on a couch. There's a mindset associated with it. It doesn't matter what you do. There is always a mindset. So let's talk about what you consider to be the ideal mindset for what you talk about in your book.
So I think the ideal mindset is one that's open-minded. I think it's one that doesn't have preconceived notions about what it's going to be, because I think people bring a lot of fear to the table when they want to change their nutrition. And I've heard it said before that it's easier to change a man's religion than it is to change how he eats. And
I like that.
yes.
I've never heard that before.
I like it though.
And when it comes to changing how people eat,
What about a woman's?
of course,
This is Louis' other side. I should just warn you. He does get like this. It happens.
I will say, women, we don't know what we want. It depends on the day. So, with that being said,
Touché.
I think it's really important that you decouple your fears from the process, because so many people think, okay, this is going to suck. A lot of people come into it to a mindset that it's going to be hard. This is going to be painful. I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to be able to eat the foods I want. I'm not going to be able to drink alcohol. I'm not going to have any fun anymore. This is going to be socially isolating, but I'm going to suck it up and do it. And I encourage people to not take that mindset into it. Instead, I encourage people to take the mindset, because if you tell yourself this is going to be painful, you're already projecting that fear onto the process when nothing even happened yet. And what I have to tell you guys, honestly, 80, 90% of the time, I have no problem eating this way. I would say there's only 2 times that I struggle. One is when I'm about to get my cycle, when my period comes, because that hormonal shift is very real. And 2 is under states of extreme stress. If any of those 2 things are happening, it will be harder for me to stick to that. But 80 to 90% of the time, I have no problem. Just stick to it. So I think that we just need to acknowledge that you need to be open-minded. It's not going to kill you. It's not as hard as it seems, because again, so many people build it up to be way harder than it is, because you're not going to die if you don't have the creamer of your choice in your Starbucks. You're going to be just fine. Like, no one's going to starve to death on this. Like, so.
It's a great
Christine.
point though.
Yes.
Go ahead, Louis.
Christine, I have a question. I would like to know, for yourself, because obviously you're living your book, how many times of a day do you eat, and what do you have for breakfast, maybe lunch or supper?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I eat, it depends on the day, sometimes 2 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. There'll be snacks in there. For breakfast, I typically do scrambled egg whites. I will do maybe 2 slices of bacon, some air fried potatoes, some sauteed spinach, maybe a side of blueberries or strawberries. I'll do black coffee. For lunch, I typically do like salmon or maybe some chicken thighs. I might do like a red lentil pasta. I'll definitely do some vegetables, maybe a little bit of rice. Dinner is pretty similar, maybe steak, maybe fish, maybe chicken, vegetables, and a modest portion of carbs. Snacks I go for cottage cheese. I go for protein shakes. I go for string cheese, apples, nut butter. I'm not too big of a snacker these days. I've been so busy, but that's pretty like typical of a day for me.
You've basically, listening to it, you've increased your protein, decreased your carbs, maybe from past eating habits.
Oh, for sure. Oh my goodness. I'm half Filipino, and growing up, we ate rice was the main dish with everything, and then like the meat or sauces and things was always like something you put on top of it. I used to eat an obscene amount of rice, and I've definitely dialed that down for sure. And I feel fuller and more satisfied on a higher protein approach. And in my book of the different macro types, I'm actually a protein fueled macro type. It's just how my body responds the best. But it again, it's not for everybody, but it works. It's what works for me.
Would you be able to work out mine if you asked me a few questions?
Yes, I would have to take you through the carb tolerance quiz and the macro type quiz, but the answer is yes. But it would probably take at least anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, maybe 45.
Right. Okay.
Yes. I would love to do it live here, but it's just not that quick, unfortunately.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just curious as to how.
Yes, the answer is yes, for sure.
Yeah, if we have 40 minutes,
And
we can definitely do it.
You say you're a protein, so you can be a protein, carb, or what was the other one?
Fat. So the thing is, when I say I'm protein fueled, it's my dominant macronutrient. It's the macronutrient that my body needs the most of. Yes, I still need fats, I still need carbs, but it orients the way the rest of the ratios are set up.
And where do you get your fats from? I heard bacon in the morning, but I'm not quite sure where you might get it from the other ones.
Yes. For the other ones, I'll get it from salmon. I sometimes I will snack on almonds, olive oil. Salmon is my favorite protein source, but it's also a nice fatty cut of meat. But yeah, I'm saying most of my fat comes from salmon or olive oil. I love olive oil.
So do you get farmed salmon or do you get fresh sea salmon?
Oh, fresh. I do not do the farmed. I can't.
Is that even salmon? I mean, it kind of looks like it, but it certainly doesn't taste like it.
No, it does not. It does not. And it's funny you bring that up because
it looks very different.
Oh, for sure. It's funny you bring that up because I used to think that people who, only ate organic or only ate, fresh, wild caught, I used to think that they were food snobs. I'm like, oh, just hit your macros. Like, don't worry about it. But the thing is, there is a difference in food quality between like organic and non-organic. And in the last couple of years, I've really discerned the differences, and it's just a personal choice. Now, I know not everybody can afford those differences, and I encourage people to get the highest quality food that they can practically afford. But food quality is just something I don't compromise in my life. I always get organic. I always get the fresh, best ingredients I can possibly afford for my health.
Because I'm big into soil at the moment, I'm obviously big into the organic side.
Yes.
But what I'm starting to realize is that people can't afford not to not go organic because of the degradation of automated agriculture.
And I agree to a certain extent. It's just it can become so limiting because like I said, I work with clients of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and some people right now, it's like, do I fill up my car with gas or do I pay rent this month? You know what I'm saying? And it's just it's a much harder choice for some individuals. It's not that simple for everybody, but with that being said, I do agree with you, and I definitely encourage people to make their choices in that direction for sure.
The way I like encouraging people is if they do have some land or garden or something, is to grow their own like we do. And
that's a good
really
idea.
We just had some cabbage from the garden and some salads and all the rest of it just now, and it's just delicious, fresh, absolutely just picked in the pot and eating it on the table. It's just gorgeous.
It's
and
fun.
we put in organic food, and I'm really into looking after the quality of the soil. So that's very high quality of the soil. Just putting compost on your lawn is
You just
hugely beneficial.
inspired me. I should definitely do that this year. It's something I've been wanting to do forever. I actually I have
I encourage you, go for it.
No, I will, because I have a celebrity client who their chef, they have all of their everything is grown fresh at their home, and it's just insane, the freshness of every single vegetable, every herb. Like, I was just like, that's brilliant. Like, that's how it should be. When you have unlimited resources, you should absolutely do that. But you're right, though, if you have land, most people can grow something.
Yeah, even if you have just a small
the growing
apartment, we do. I mean, we have a tiny apartment, and yet we have a little bit of the space out front of the apartment. So there's some space. It's there. How are you going to use it?
No, that's a great idea. That's something I really need to do.
There's something I learned along the way with soil is in 1920, an orange had 8 times more nutrition than an orange today.
Wow. That's crazy. And how is that measured? Based off of like mineral content, vitamin C content?
I did find the website that did the study. I can possibly send that to you, because I'm not into the science. I am interested that somebody's actually done a study.
Yes.
But digging into it is not really my scene. But the fact that our soil is degraded is unequivocal. Nobody can really argue that in any shape or form.
It's kind of fun too when Louis gets into how to turn the soil around, because he gets into talking about all kinds of stuff growing together. And I in the context of a conversation like this, I keep thinking, well, it's like having your entire salad all in one place. You got the tomato, you got the lettuce. It's just like, okay, just scoop this piece of ground up, bring it in the kitchen. We got ourselves dinner.
Cucumber, carrot, yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Again, like I said, there's something I've been wanting to do forever. I just never got around to it. I've done like little herb gardens and stuff like that, but like I've never and I've done like tomatoes and potted plants, but I have the space. It's just something I've never done. Just something I've never done. And
getting your hands in that soil is so healing.
Oh my goodness. I used
so many levels.
I used to love gardening, but my dogs would just tear things up. So it got a little challenging, but I can dedicate a special spot for sure.
Have you got some kids to help you?
No, I have 2 pit bulls though.
Okay. They're your kids, all right.
Yes, my fur babies.
That's okay though. Fur babies like that can actually be useful, because if you train them right, they can keep everybody else out in the garden.
Yes, sure.
Pit bulls, they're determined.
My wife's a gardener, and she's got green fingers, and it's just incredible what she can produce in such a, in the amount of area we got. She just wants a bigger plot, a bigger area. We're looking to possibly move, but the prerequisite of the new house is how much land have we got, not how nice the house is.
But that's also one of the things that you've been teaching us here on the program, Louis, about it isn't so much how much space you have, it's how you use it, right? Because if you allow stuff to grow the way that is most soil beneficial, you can get a lot of yield out of a small space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I took the railway sleepers and built the beds myself, and got 3 big beds, or biggish beds. They're actually small compared to, but for a garden, they're fairly big. But yeah, it was hard work you did once, and now we got a new composting system, which is speeding up the whole compost making, because compost costs quite a bit. So you want to be able to speed that up, and it heats it up and keeps it warm. So everything is changing for us. We just bought solar panels, so just
That's
going
awesome.
more and more in that direction, which we're quite enjoying the whole journey. But I'm not fanatical about it. Anybody can have what they want. They can believe what they want, and I'm just enjoying my journey, and I'm excited about it at the moment.
That's awesome.
There's a Save Soil group that I'm part of at the moment. That the guy's coming next week to London, and he's riding a motorbike all the way from London all the way to India, through all the countries. And if Ukraine's open, he says he'll go through it.
Wow.
And he's got over 10 million volunteers, of which I'm one of them, in different areas, but most of them have turned their attention to Save Soil now. So he's got about 10 million volunteers. The whole which I'm helping set up seating and stuff for next Saturday. It's got 6,500 seats, and that's all fully sold out.
Oh wow.
Not sold out. It's sold out. And yeah, it's just exciting to see somebody really pushing to make governmental changes, which one country just signed yesterday or the day before. The UN is partnered with the group Safe Soil. So, you know, it's a big group. He's targeting 3.5 billion people. So it's probably going to be the biggest single focused event on the planet that's probably ever been. I don't know if anybody else tried to target 3.5 billion people. I don't know. I don't think so.
You get
But
into numbers
the
that large, it's kinda
passion
like,
of all these youngsters is
Oh, yeah.
amazing. They can really see it. You know, they are just full on.
That's fantastic.
when you get
You
into
ask them
numbers
something
that
about
large,
soil or how to improve it, and they don't know anything. But they're sending the message all over the place. It's quite funny. So you got different people in the group with different skills. You got the scientists, and it's all very scientist based. This is not just thumb sucking information, all the rest of it. They've really gone to town of getting the most credible scientists out there to make predictions, because fossil fuels, petrol, 52 years. So you guys call it gas, but I'm going to say petroleum because the second one is gas, and that is 53 years, and then coal is about 120 years, and then it's gone. But again, different scientists will have different points of view on that. But
as has
it
always
seems
been.
to be the consensus is those are the kind of figures. So fossil fuels is going out. We don't have enough of the mineral for the batteries. I think California's got a place which they're just revitalizing. They bought everything from China because China was doing it all for the batteries because it was much cheaper. But now America's starting to get into the fray of getting what is needed to make batteries. But it's quite complicated because, you know, batteries are not going to cover it, because I don't think we're going to have enough resources to replace all cars with battery cars. So where do we go? We're going to have to look at many different options out there, and it's exciting times.
It's funny because I did my grad research on fuel cells when I was, you know, studying my chemical engineering, and we, you know, I'm not sure if you know what a fuel cell is. I'm sorry to digress, but a fuel cell powers, you know, creates energy from the chemical energy it takes to create water. And the technology has been around since the 60s. They put the Gemini space shuttles using fuel cells. And I think one problem is just it's going to be really hard to move our economy away from petroleum. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the technology exists. It's just, I think it's going to be a very hard shift because, you know, there's a lot of people who won't be making money as a result of that. So I think there's a lot of big political variables with that as well.
Yeah, but there are going to be new jobs from the new ways they're going to make it. So, you know, being flexible is really a good place to be. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a journey.
And I'll be honest, I actually feel very optimistic about the whole thing. Because I believe that with all the different ideas that have developed, particularly over the last couple hundred years, but especially in the last 25 to 50 years, of how you can accomplish things, what are the alternative ways of doing that? There's not going to be any lack of how can we get away from petroleum? How can we get away from this? How can we get into this new thing? There's going to be there's probably going to be a surplus of them, and it's going to be a question of, well, which ones do we leave behind? But it's all going to sort itself out. So yeah, I feel very optimistic about it. So when we have somebody like you on, Christine, telling us also, here's another little thing. This is a thing about how can you improve your diet? How can you improve your life, your body, and so forth. That's like one more piece of information. It's one more piece to the puzzle. And that puzzle just keeps filling in with pieces all the time. So that's why I'm so optimistic about it.
You know what I'm bumping into now is solar farms with sheep running around it and tomatoes and everything. And they're doing it. They literally, they've got them there, so they're mixing everything together, Really incredible what they're coming up with these days, really. It's brilliant. I love it.
It is brilliant. So, okay, we should probably do a little summing up here. So, first of all, the book is available, I guess, everywhere.
Yes, it is available everywhere books are sold. So you guys can find it on Amazon, hardcover, audiobook, as well as ebook. It's also available at Barnes and Noble, Target, Books a Million, like Kindle, Apple Books, like anywhere books are sold. And yeah, so just be honest with yourself. That's what I've been telling my clients lately. If you don't see yourself actually sitting down and read it, just get the audiobook because people go for a drive, they go for a walk, or go on the treadmill. It may be easier for some people to digest the information audibly. So
Did you read the audiobook?
Yeah, that's the question I had. I wanted to know the same thing. You did read it.
Did,
You
yes.
narrated your own book. All right.
Excellent.
It took me 5 days in the sound booth to do so, but it came out lovely, and my clients love it because they're so used to hearing my voice on YouTube. I have close to 1,000 videos, so they're used to me by now. So I loved doing it, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
I think also when you do your own book, when you read your own book, it comes across better.
I'd agree.
That does, absolutely.
Yeah, it made me
except when it comes to what's the guy? I'll think about it. But yeah, there are exceptions to the rule.
There was one exception.
It's a very, very famous book. You would know it immediately.
Okay.
Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. Eckhart Tolle shouldn't read his own books.
Oh, okay.
Power of Now.
Well, 99.9% of authors should read their own books. Yeah, I suppose it does depend on how well you're able to actually read in a way that people are going to enjoy. That there is some truth to that, and there's a skill in that for sure. But I don't have any trouble believing that you were able to do that, Christine. You have a very calm, soothing voice. That's a perfect voice for a narrator.
Oh,
so
thank you. Yeah, no, I truly enjoyed doing it, and I feel like my clients who have purchased the audiobooks already, they said they've enjoyed like hearing it. Because even the people reading it, they're like, I hear your voice in this, but the people, they're like, wow, it is your voice. So it's bizarre, but it's been a surreal experience. I've never been proud of anything else. I've never been more proud of anything in my career as I am of this book. It's not just the writing of the book, it's the research, it's everything I've ever done in my entire career in one place. And this isn't a guide to say, hey, this is the Christine way to do things. It's a, hey, what's going to work best for you? Let's figure this out together. So it's a tool to support self-discovery. And I think that when people really feel seen in the words, and they're like, that is me, that does describe me, it really helps people feel heard. Because I have so many clients, they go to doctors, they go to specialists, and they don't feel seen. They don't feel like they're hitting the nail on the head with what they're experiencing and how they should pivot as a result of that.
Very important, very good too. I really like that a lot. Besides the book, of course, people might also want to find out about Christine Hronec, because I mean, she's out there. She's got a YouTube channel. I imagine she's got a website. So tell us a little bit about how do they find you?
Yes, you guys can find me on my website, which is gaugegirltraining.com, GAUGE, girltraining.com. On Instagram at Gauge Girl Training, YouTube Gauge Girl Training. I'm on Pinterest, Twitter. I just started TikToking. I'm learning it. I am doing it. I'm committed. I also have a supplement company, Gauge Life, GAUGE Life, Gauge Life Supplements. You guys can check that out as well.
Where did Gauge come from? I'm curious.
I wish it had a deep philosophical meaning, but it does not. My first manufacturing company was called Muscle Gauge Nutrition. And I had this profile screen name. I called myself Gauge Girl, and I don't know, I just knew the name Gauge Girl would be special. And that was back in like 2009, 2010. And here we are, like 12, 13 years later, a best-selling book. I was literally in Times Square this weekend, and my book and my face were on a billboard in Times Square.
Oh, wow.
It was surreal. It was surreal. I'm very grateful. I'm very honored, and very, very humbled to be able to do work that I love.
That's so exciting.
Just for your information, Christine, I just checked up Audible UK, and it doesn't seem to be there.
I will talk to my publisher about that. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you so much.
I was just about to buy it. I've got credits.
Oh, I will.
Well, thank you for being with us on the show today, sharing your expertise,
you.
sharing your story. This has been really fabulous.
Yes, you gentlemen were wonderful to chat with. You guys are so awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. This was very enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being
Thank you,
with us.
Christine.
And thank you, Louis, for joining us on a Tuesday instead of Monday. That was a nice
You're
little shift,
welcome.
too. Even with this shift in daylight savings time, you managed to navigate. Very well done. Thank you to our
No
podcast
worries.
listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care, everybody.